it's inspired by a true story. I think I'm always, I actually, I think truth is most often more stranger, more interesting than fiction. But what do they say about fiction? Fiction is the truth inside the lie. But it was inspired by a true story. There's a documentary from 2018 called "Tell Me Who I Am." And it tells the story of Alex and Marcus Lewis, who were these identical twins in England. And one of them, Alex, suffers a traumatic brain injury after a motorcycle accident. And when he awakens from his coma, the only thing he remembers is his brother's face and name. He doesn't remember any of their history. He doesn't remember any of their other family. He doesn't remember anything they've ever done, and no memories at all, just his brother's face and name. And I thought, wow, this is such an extraordinary situation. And I thought about my own mom and her identical twin, and like they were mirror twins, as Kat and Jude are in the book, and their names are actually Catherine and Judith. So I really drew a lot from my mom's relationship with her identical twin. But it became, questions for me like, is if you decide to reinvent somebody's life for them, is that a gift, or is that the biggest betrayal you can perpetrate? And if it was a gift, who is it a gift for? And what do you do with that gift? And how far do you take the lies that you decide to start telling? How far do you go with it? And what happens, as in the case of Kat and Jude, if those lies are covering up a dangerous past? And, with each sort of layer of the onion peeling back and Kat asking more and more questions about her real history, where does that lead them? And so I wanted to answer all those questions. And I just thought it was such an extraordinary situation for those twins to have found themselves in. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Alex and Marcus, obviously were men, and I wanted to make them women. So that was my first big change. And Marcus and Alex Lewis's story also takes place in the 80s. And I was like, I like placing in that era, but I also want to go back to the 70s. I wanted a dual timeline where we're getting the invented story that Jude is telling her sister, and we're also getting the real story that Jude is relating as it happens, unfolds in the 1970s. And so all of that was my own invention, and the lies that Jude tells is all of my invention. And of course the ending and everything that happens, which, hopefully if you read the book, I just got a good review from NPR, and they said the shocking ending. I am such a prolific outliner. I mean, for my nonfiction books, my outlines are always longer than the books themselves. My outline for George Remus for The Ghost of Eden Park was about 103,000 words. I think the book itself was about 95. My outline for my most recent nonfiction was 120,000 words, and the book itself is 85,000. So I really write an outline and then I carve a book out of the outline. So I tried to do the same thing for my fiction. I was like, I'm just going to outline this thing. I am just going to outline it, and it's going to be so much easier than nonfiction because I don't have to, spend all this time actually doing research. I can outline it and really just let my imagination go as long as I follow the confines of my outline. And I realized pretty quickly that fiction doesn't work like that. Like you can have an idea where you want to go, but it's not necessarily in service to the story that you start to tell. The story starts to take on a life of its own. And I always thought that was bullshit when people would say that, because it was kind of like, no, you're in charge. The story doesn't take a life of your own. It's your story. But what happens is it's not that you're still not in charge, but the thing you created starts to take shape, and you see that your preconceived notions about it were wrong. So you just really have to change your approach. And I had to do that with my outline. I threw it away. And I always had an idea of what I wanted the ending to be. And like a lot of fiction writers who I talked to also do this. I knew the ending and I kind of wrote backwards for a time. I'm so excited about it. I've been wanting to tell this story for probably 12 years. And publishers have told me no over and over again, not to tell it. But it's called Eden Undone, a true story of sex, murder, and utopia at the dawn of World War II. And it tells the true story of a 1930s Galapagos murder mystery. A bunch of settlers left Europe when the chaos was starting to envelop Europe in the lead up to the war, and went to the Galapagos Islands in search of a utopia, trying to sort of get away from civilization and create their own idyllic world. And as utopias often do, it went horribly awry. and turned into sort of a Lord of the Flies situation. Lord of the Flies with much more sex, I guess you could say. And it's the craziest story I've ever read in my entire life. And I think I tell pretty crazy stories. This one, I mean, if you think George Remus is weird, this one is exponentially weirder, and I loved every second of it. In the case of this story of Eden Undone, the principal characters wrote quite a bit about themselves, which was very telling and very interesting. Especially there was one character who was a German a philosopher. He's a Nietzsche fanatic who is developing his own philosophy. One of the peculiar quirks about him is that he, before moving to the island of Floriana in the Galapagos, decides to remove all of his teeth. It's not only was he anticipating dental problems, because he's going to be on a remote island without, service of regular dentistry, but he wanted to test his theory that gums could become teeth and gums would be much more efficient teeth.